Just the one by-election result to get into this week. As I said last week, very, very quiet one for us to get into. And this actually happened on a Tuesday night. I didn't notice that when I was doing the previews last week. But again, over in Wales, they do their by-elections on a Tuesday night rather than a Thursday night. So I'm sure you've probably already seen the result, but we'll talk about it anyway. So Milford Hakin ward in Pembrokeshire Council. If you remember last week, we looked at the open council data and saw that it's a very, very independent-heavy council. The independents have got a majority in their own right. I thought, therefore, with an independent standing down here and another 3 independents standing in this election, I thought that the independents would win, but actually they didn't. The Reform Party have won. So, look, a very small, again, share of the vote to win on, 27% of the votes, largely due to there being a lot of candidates on the ballot paper and actually all of them doing fairly well. So, yeah, look, a good win for Reform, and a number of you were very useful in the comments contextualising this for me and for the channel, how Pembrokeshire is known as sort of Little England and the very west of Wales there, and that traditionally it's been a more conservative voting territory. So as far as the Conservatives go, they finished in second place and their vote held up. So it's interesting here. The Conservatives beaten by Reform, but their vote share actually held up almost exactly. So the Reform vote didn't come from Conservatives here in Pembrokeshire. It came from people voting for the Independents previously. One of the Independents, it's difficult to tell because this system kind of breaks down when you have more than one Independent, but one Independent was down 20 points, the other one was down 32 points. This would be the one who won previously, or the one that's counting as being won recently. Obviously, it's not the same person because that person left the council, which is why the election happened in the first place. But they're down 32 points. So you can see together the independents there lost over 50 points off of their vote share. The Greens did actually pretty well, up to 13 points in this ward, having not stood here before as well. That's not too shabby actually for the Greens in what you guys have said is generally a more conservative voting sort of area. Lib Dems came in just under 9%. Labour finished in last place, which isn't looking good for them, is it? I mean, look, like I say, it's not a Labour voting area, it seems, but still, to finish in last place behind the Green Party, I think spells out the kind of trouble Labour are facing in May when the local elections come round. So there's a slender majority for Reform of 5 points, so it's just leaning towards them there. Only 35 votes in it. Turnout 661, so 33% is actually pretty good, or it's above the average that we've been seeing of 30% recently, so not too shabby. I'd love to see these turnouts getting higher, though. It is a shame that I have to sit here and say that anything above 30% is a good turnout. I'd love to see these up into the 70s and 80s%, frankly, even for by-elections. I think it's very important that people go out and exercise their right to vote when they have it. But there you have it. That's the only result from this week. So a good win for Reform in Pembrokeshire. And I guess, yeah, in terms of how it's going to go in Wales in May, I keep coming back to it when we have these Welsh ones. I'm not sure how much of an insight we get from these by-elections necessarily because, no Plaid Cymru standing here, and you guys said it's not really an area that they tend to do very well in, based off the things we spoke about earlier. It's going to be a battle between Reform and Plaid Cymru, I'm pretty certain. I think Labour are going to get annihilated. The Tories are, well, I mean, look, maybe the Tory vote, I mean, the Tories didn't have a huge presence in Wales anyway, if I remember rightly. So maybe some of their vote holds up if they are, able to hold up here. Maybe that's a good sign for them. But I imagine they're going to have a pretty rough evening as well on the 7th. And yeah, that's it. So that's it for this week. We will now go ahead and look at the preview for next week. Next week, we have 4, so we have a bit more to get our teeth into next week, and we're going to start in Axholme Central Ward, North Lincolnshire. So, Conservatives defending, and once again, we're back up in Lincolnshire. So, they got 68.8% of the vote last time, the Conservatives. Let's see what happens to that, and let's see what happens with the Reform vote coming in. Look, last week we saw in North Kesteven, Reform beating the Independents there and finishing in first place with 45-ish% of the vote. Lincolnshire, obviously, County Council last year, the Reform Party won really quite comfortably. So for North Lincolnshire, this will be a district council. Let's see. I imagine I would expect a Reform win, but who knows? Again, as always, if you guys know idiosyncrasies of the particular area, or you have a particular insight, please do get in the comments and let us all know. But I would have to, I assume that this will go towards the Reform Party. However, the Tories have a big lead there. 68.8% of the vote is a big old vote share to defend. So they could lose a big chunk and still win, which is not impossible at all. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see an even bigger fall off for the Conservatives and Reform take their place, getting over 40% of the vote. Would not surprise me. Greens are standing as well, so let's see what happens at Labour votes. Only the two of them stood last time, so Labour mopped up the remaining just under a third of the votes. Again, let's see how much Greens can eat into that vote, because it is becoming more common now to see the Greens finish with more of a vote share than Labour. So they are gradually eating in to those Labour numbers. Let's see if they can do it in Lincolnshire, though, which I wouldn't necessarily put down as a natural territory for the Green Party. Brumby, also North Lincolnshire, so very much the same story, except we've got Labour who are defending here, so 62% of the vote almost for them. This will be an interesting one to see what happens with the Greens. This is where the Greens will potentially come into their own. If this was a Labour voting area, can the Greens entice enough of those Labour voters over to them? They got 5% last time. They were way behind. Well, I think they finished in third by the looks of it, with the Lib Dems slightly behind them. Can they eat into that Labour vote? Look, they did it in Liverpool last week. We saw in Aigburth, wasn't it? So can they keep doing that? Like, again, Lincolnshire doesn't strike me as necessarily Green territory, but if they're going to do what they hope to do and essentially become the voice of the left, they've got to start broadening their appeal. Can they start doing that in Lincolnshire next year? Again, this next week. Tories here got 30% of the vote last time. Again, let's see what happens to that with Reform coming in. Wouldn't write off a Reform win here, by the way. I think the Greens have more of a shot, seeing as it voted Labour last time. But the Reform are more than capable of winning votes off of the Labour Party, as we have seen. So I wouldn't put it past them to win by any stretch of the imagination. We've also then got Halstead, Knockholt and Badgers Mount Ward. It's a bit of a mouthful. In Sevenoaks, Conservatives defending here. Again, there's another one that was just a straight shootout between them and the Lib Dems last time. So another one where they got over 60% of the vote last time. The Lib Dems mopped up the remaining just over a third in this case. And I think this could be an interesting one because, look, Sevenoaks last year, obviously in under the Kent County Council area. So this was, they had an election last year, and Reform picked up a handful of seats in the Sevenoaks area. The Tories held one of their seats, and the Lib Dems won one as well. So this could be quite an even one. I don't know whereabouts this ward is in relation to those county council divisions, but look, you can see there's 4 parties standing this time, with Reform and the Greens coming into the mix. And I think it could be another one of these that potentially could be quite evenly split. Again, if you're from the area and you know more, please do get in the comments and let me know. But I just think this could be one that's much more evenly split potentially. Don't write off the Greens doing putting up decent numbers here. And like I said, the Lib Dems won a seat, so they have a chance. Obviously, they got a decent share of the vote last time, but there was only 2 parties available. And is this a place where the Tories can hold up? I mean, the Tory vote is quite unpredictable actually, because we have seen them in recent weeks decline by as much as 30% plus or 30 points plus. And other places, their vote's holding up with no real change. So, who knows? If it's a Conservative-friendly area, maybe they can hold up their vote here. But, with Reform coming in, it always makes things a bit more interesting. Like I say, they've got a handful of these divisions in Kent County Council around Sevenoaks last year. So, again, as always, really, wouldn't write Reform off potentially getting a win here. And I think this could also be one where we see a winner on quite a low share of the vote, around those low 30s, maybe even high 20s% potentially. Let me know what you think in the comments. And then lastly, we've got Stanford, Vale of Whitehorse. So we're back to Vale of Whitehorse and Oxfordshire again. This is Lib Dem defending, and I think the Lib Dems will hold again. They got 44% of the vote last time. The Tories got 43% of the vote. So let's see what happens this time with the Tory vote, because last week, when we looked at this, Liberal Democrats defended successfully, but the Tories were beaten down into third place, weren't they? They lost to the Greens and Reform. So the Greens here already had a decent showing of 12% last time. Let's see what Reform do. Can they overtake the Tories? Can the Greens overtake the Tories? And is this, trend of the Tories being pushed out of Oxfordshire going to continue? Be a very, very interesting one to look at. And that's it. So that's next week. Do make sure you tune in. Hit the notification bell if you haven't already to tune in for next week's by-election results. And because it's only 10 minutes, I'm going to talk very, very briefly, because actually I've managed to eke the video out a bit longer. Talk a bit briefly about some things that you guys said in the comments last week you'd like to talk about at the end of this video. So we'll get into that. Okay, so I'm just going to talk very briefly about Restore, because I that came up in the comments. It's come up in the comments a few times actually over the last week, a few weeks since that. Well, it's not actually a party yet, but since they launched. So I'm going to just talk about this with the Nowcast in the background. I might refer to it if something comes into my brain, but we haven't looked at the Nowcast on this channel for a long time, so you can get a good eyeful of it. It's changed quite a bit since we last looked at it, actually. There's a lot more green on there now. So Restore, yeah. I mean, a lot of the questions were along the lines of, what do I think of Restore? Are they going to make an impact? My initial reaction is that I don't think Restore will come to all that much. In all honesty, I know they have and I'm sure many of you know, they have a very enthusiastic online presence. You know, I'm on X a lot, and I see a lot of pro Restore accounts, and obviously they're very anti-reform, mostly anti-reform actually. I don't think that extends outside of the online sphere all that much. I may well be wrong. I'm more than happy to be proved wrong on this, but I think already the right wing of British politics is quite crowded, because just with the two parties of Reform and, notionally the Conservatives. You know, I think you can argue about the Conservatives not being a right wing party, in all fairness, but yeah, I think the right wing's already quite crowded. And I think ultimately, my view is that one of those two parties, Reform or the Conservatives, will have to go. I don't think they can coexist. Not as two major parties anyway. One of them will have to either disappear completely or fade into a fairly irrelevant minor party that wins a handful or even no seats in Parliament. I think that has to happen for the right wing of UK politics to be fully united. So there isn't much room for Restore, therefore, to muscle in there, and I just don't. I think they're too early. I think if Reform were in the similar position to the Tories, where they've been in government and had backpedaled and not done a lot of what they said they were going to do, then there would be a space for Restore. Beg your pardon. But I think, look at Advance in Gorton and Denton. You know, Advance have a very similar mission statement to Restore, i.e., Reform isn't the real thing. They're weak sauce. Nigel Farage isn't serious. We're the real deal. Vote for us if you want proper right wing politics. And they got less than the Monster Raven Looney Party in Gorton and Denton. Now, I do think Restore has a bit more of bite to it, but they don't have any really serious political operators in there just now. They have Rupert Lowe, who is the party, basically. So, you know, at the moment, it is very much a one-man band. And actually, as we saw with a poll recently, not many people know who he is across the country. I think it was 8% could recognise him. That's a massive problem. And I think, in reality, a lot of people won't have heard of Restore. They won't know who they are. They're not currently a party. They are going through the registration process, but they're not actually a registered party. They can't stand in an election under Restore, I don't believe, because they've not been registered with the Electoral Commission. So until that's all sorted out, I think all the numbers about their membership are a little bit questionable, because remember they started as a movement, is what they called it. Whether you want to call it a think tank or a pressure group, whatever you want. That's how they started, and they invited people to come, and you could sign up. You could pay to become a member of this movement. And I think at the moment it's quite unclear how many of those people who signed up to that have just been ported over to be assumed members of the party. And it may well be that a lot of the people who signed up to be members of the movement don't want to be members of a party for whatever reason. They might already be members of another party, or they just don't want to be members of a political party. So there's some question marks around the membership, I think. And in terms of polling, I know there's been a few Find Out Now polls that Restore have been quite keen to quote, showing them on around about 7% of the votes. Find Out Now themselves have said when they've done those polls that they're not to be likened to their normal opinion polling. because the methodology has been changed a bit. The prompting's different, so they made a caveat to say this shouldn't be compared to like for like to our general election Westminster voting intention polls that we do. I think one pollster I think it's Focal Data. They essentially did run a normal poll with Restore and your party included. Your party got 0% of the vote, which in my opinion is very heartening to see. And Restore got 2%. So I think that's probably where they're at 1 to 2% of the vote nationally, which is not going to get you anywhere. Is there scope for the party in the future? Well, yes, I think there is. I mean, as far as I say with Reform, if Reform come into government, and this might happen at local level. Look, they've already got a number of county councils under their control. After May, they may all have a number of district councils under control. If Restore, they're too similarly named. If Restore can get a narrative going that the Reform just backpedal on all their promises, then maybe there is scope for them. But I don't see with what the kind of things that I see Restore advocating for at the moment, which gets a bit close to. Well, I don't want to accuse the party itself of this, because I don't think it's actually coming from the party, but from the people that I see supporting the party, it gets very close to ethno-nationalism, which I don't think there's a great appetite for, and I think is a bit ugly. So, yeah, I don't know if the way they... Interestingly, I'm going to wrap up soon, and I'll talk forever otherwise, but one of the criticisms that's been levelled at Reform is that they have moved from the right to the centre. Now, I don't necessarily think that's happened all that much. I actually think they were probably less right-wing than a lot of people thought in the first place, purely because the media likes to paint them as far right, or certain parts of the media like to paint them as far right, which I don't think they've ever been. So I don't actually think Reform has moved all that much, but it probably has moved a little bit, because in order to win an election in the UK under first past the post, you have to appeal to a broad audience. You can't be an extremist party. And I don't think Reform ever were an extremist party. And I don't necessarily think Restore is an extremist party, but they're closer to that end of the spectrum than Reform are. And you will never get a broad enough coalition of people voting for you to form your own majority government. And, another thing that people asked me to talk about was first past the post and why I like it. And that's one of the reasons. First past the post delivers you a strong government, one party that can essentially go to the House of Commons, and then the Commons, in its function as a legislature, essentially elects a government from itself. Is kind of how it works. It not literally, but the Prime Minister has to control the House of Commons, has to have the confidence of the House of Commons in order to form a government. And so having a one party sent to the Commons in good enough numbers for that to happen is why you get strong government, generally speaking. We are going through a phase at the moment where the vote is so split off that first past the post looks weak. Labour got 2/3 of the seats on 1/3 of the votes. And that's because the vote in the UK has fractured a lot. And there's a lot of different parties competing. And that's why we're seeing in the by-elections quite often parties winning with less than 30% of the vote. I think that will change over time. Parties will merge. Parties will, some parties will disappear, survival of the fittest, and some will merge together to form coalitions. Our coalitions in the UK tend to work within the parties themselves rather than in the parliament. Our parliament is designed for confrontational politics. It's not, it's face to face. It's not in this horseshoe that most parliaments around the world are. And that's our system. That's how it works. And it's worked quite well for us over, more than 2 centuries. It's adversarial, and it's supposed to be, but there's coalitions within those parties. And that's essentially what's happened to Labour and the Tories. Those coalitions got too broad. You couldn't keep the left wing and the right wing of those two parties together. It happened to the Conservatives. It's happening to Labour, I think, now as we speak. And so those will splinter off. And we're going to go through this period of time where there is this very fractured vote. But then it will come together because parties will form their own coalitions and pick a direction, pick a leader that determines a direction. And then there's your new sort of 2-party system. First past the post will go back to working as it's supposed to. That's my view. It's my opinion. I know a lot of people disagree. And that's my thoughts on Restore at the moment. I don't think they're going to have much of an impact in the immediate term. I don't think there's market share for them at the moment. Reform are definitely on a bit of a slip in terms of the opinion polling, but as far as the by-elections go, they're still doing quite well. So it's difficult to see, and we'll really know after May the 7th if Reform have slipped a lot from last year, or if they're still looking good. I mean, look, this nowcast map we're looking at, you can see there's actually a lot more blue on there as well. The Conservatives with a bit of a comeback in Lincolnshire, which is interesting based off what we were talking about, the by-elections for next week. So, there's a bit more blue around here, sort of Yorkshire into Lincolnshire area. So, totally ignore me. I beg your pardon. That's not Lincolnshire in the slightest. That's up in Yorkshire. But either way, it's the Tories. I don't think they're, like I said, I don't think they're on a comeback, but they're not quite as low as they were previously. Yeah, look, let me know what you think in the comments anyway about Restore, about First Past the Post, and about all the elections we looked at as well. So we've got 4 next week. Like I said, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the Roundup next week. Again, I'll try and get into doing the sort of local election previews again shortly, because 7th of May is coming up and it's pretty quickly now. And yeah, once again, guys, thank you for watching. Please do hit a like and get in the comments with all your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.